History is often written by the victors, but what if the most significant parts of our past weren't just rewritten, but completely erased? We are taught that humanity has progressed in a linear fashion, from primitive tools to modern technology. But as we look closer at the structures left behind from the 18th and 19th centuries, a disturbing pattern emerges. Why are the doorways of our oldest government buildings 15 feet high? Why are the steps of grand staircases scaled for legs far longer than ours? Today, we dive into the mystery of the guardians of Tartaria, the giants that history tried to forget. In the mid to late 1800s, photography was in its infancy. There were no digital filters, no Photoshop, and no easy way to manipulate an image convincingly. Yet, archives across the globe contain photographs that defy explanation. These aren't mythical drawings, they are clear, grain-matched photos showing individuals of immense stature, 8, 9, even 10 feet tall. These giants weren't depicted as circus-side shows, they were captured in formal settings, wearing the sophisticated clothing of the era, often standing alongside people of average height. What's striking is their demeanor. They weren't treated as medical anomalies or freaks of nature. In many records from the Russian Empire, the British Museum and French archives, these individuals appear in roles of authority. They were guards, overseers, and ceremonial figures. But why did these photographs suddenly stop appearing after 1900s? Why did an entire demographic of humans simply vanish from the visual record? If you walk through the historic districts of St. Petersburg, Buenos Aires, or Washington, D.C., you will notice something peculiar about the neoclassical, or colonial, architecture. The scale is monumental. We are told these oversized doors and massive ceilings were designed for grandeur, or to intimidate. But does that explanation hold up when you find 12-foot doors in back office hallways where the public never set foot? Consider the furniture. In museum basements and forgotten estate sales, researchers have found chairs and desks that are anatomically correct, but scaled at 1/5x the human norm. These aren't thrones, they are functional, everyday items. When you place one of the giants from the 19th century photographs into these buildings, the architecture finally makes sense. The impractical height of the stairs and the excessive scale of the rooms become perfectly proportional. This suggests that these buildings weren't built for us, they were built for them. Between 1850 and 1920, something changed in the way we record history. The Smithsonian Institution and other major academic bodies began a process of standardization. Reports of giant skeleton, which used to be common in mainstream newspapers like the New York Times, suddenly dried up. Excavations in the American Midwest frequently uncovered remains of individuals over 7 feet tall, often buried with advanced artifacts. Yet, today, if you ask these institutions about those findings, the answer is always the same: no such records exist. The physical evidence was catalogued, shipped away, and lost in the miscellaneous archives of history. To understand the giants, we must look at the land they allegedly inhabited. If you look at an encyclopedia or a map from the late 1700s, you will see a vast territory labeled Tartaria, or Grand Tartary. It spanned from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean. It wasn't just a desert, it was a recognized geopolitical entity with its own flag, its own leaders, and its own sophisticated infrastructure. By the mid-19th century, Tartaria vanished. It was replaced on the maps by Russia, Mongolia, and China. Historians tell us it was merely a geographic term for a region, but the remnants of the Tartarian style, massive star forts, red brick complexes, and high-precision masonry suggest a unified global civilization. What if these giants weren't just random people? What if they were a specialized class within the Tartarian system? The evidence points to them being the guardians, or administrators, in a world where massive stone blocks needed to be moved and complex infrastructure maintained. A taller, stronger class of humans would have been a functional necessity. The photographs often show these giants overseeing construction projects or standing at the entrances of administrative hubs. They were the bridge between the high technology of the past and the laborers of the era. This explains why the buildings have two sets of proportions: human-scaled living quarters and giant-scaled administrative halls. Many of the world's most famous structures, the Great Exhibition buildings, the original Capitol buildings, and the massive cathedrals, were supposedly built in remarkably short timeframes using horse and buggy technology. We are told that 19th century workers with hand tools carved millions of tons of granite and limestone with laser-like precision. However, if we introduce the concept of the guardian class, the timeline becomes more believable. If the builders were physically capable of handling weights we find impossible today, and if they possessed a different understanding of physics and engineering, our current history of technology is fundamentally flawed. We didn't build these cities, we inherited them. When the Tartarian civilization collapsed or was systematically dismantled, the new owners of these cities had to explain why the doorways were so high. Their solution: it's just for decoration. Why would anyone want to hide this? The answer lies in control. If you admit that a superior, more physically capable, and technologically advanced civilization existed only 200 years ago, it undermines the narrative of modern progress. It suggests that we are living in the ruins of a golden age, rather than at the pinnacle of human achievement. The Guardians had to be erased because their very existence proved that the official version of human biology and history was a lie. Beyond the photos and the buildings, there is a third category of evidence: the artifacts. In industrial museums and old machine shops, there exist tools that no modern man could operate. 5-foot-long wrenches, hammers that weigh 100 pounds, and precision instruments designed for hands twice the size of ours. Official curators label these as industrial curiosities or ceremonial tools, but these items show signs of wear and tear, the kind of erosion that only comes from decades of manual use. Why would a factory manufacture a 200-pound wrench if there was no one capable of swinging it? The existence of these tools is a silent testimony to the strength of those who once wielded them. Standard science tells us that gigantism is a medical disorder that leads to weakness and early death. While this is true for some individuals today, the giants of the 19th century photographs do not look sickly. They look robust, well-proportioned, and healthy. They don't have the distorted features associated with modern pituitary issues. This suggests that there was once a different strain of the human genome, a biological diversity that has been pruned from the family tree. Just as we have different breeds of dogs with different physical capabilities, humanity may have once been more diverse. By classifying all large humans as medical anomalies, science effectively closes the door on investigating them as a legitimate part of our history. When you put the pieces together, the picture is undeniable. The geography, the disappearance of Tartaria from the maps; the biology, the sudden end of giant skeleton discoveries and photographs; the infrastructure, the globe old world architecture built to an impossible scale; the systematic silence, the missing records at the Smithsonian and other institutions. This wasn't a series of accidents, it was a coordinated effort to reset the human timeline. By the early 20th century, the Guardians were gone. Whether through conflict, environmental changes, or a systematic cleansing, they were removed from the stage of history. We moved into their buildings, lowered the ceilings, added false floors to the staircases, and told our children that we were the first civilized people to walk these streets. We walk past the evidence every day. We see it in the oversized windows of our city halls and the massive stone foundations of our bridges. The Guardians of Tartaria may be gone, and their names may be erased from the books, but their legacy is etched into the very stone of our cities. The next time you walk through an old building and feel small, don't just assume it was meant to impress you. Consider the possibility that the person who designed it was simply building for a friend who stood 9 feet tall. History isn't just what is written in textbooks, it's what we see with our own eyes when we finally decide to look. The giants are only lost because we have agreed to stop looking for them. It's time to start asking the questions that were never meant to be asked.